So I want to talk a little bit about developing your digital camera skills with street photography. Actually, I shouldn't say digital camera skills because all this applies to whether you're shooting film or digital. Um, First, there is as many definitions of street photography as there are photographers doing it. So for our purposes, my purposes, I'm going to define street photography as nearly anything that takes place on the street or anything that can be seen from the street. Many photographers don't include landscapes or buildings. Some don't even include automobiles in their photos. Some insist that street photos are only candid, unposed images of people. On some level, I do kind of accept that definition. I think that street photography should show interaction with people as much as possible. But I also recognize that those buildings didn't get there without some people doing something, even if I don't actually see them doing it at the moment. One distinction I'll make, though, is if you, I do think they should primarily be candid. That doesn't mean you can't walk up to somebody that you find interesting and ask them if you can take their picture, and now they're looking right in your camera and it's a posed image, and that's in my mind a street portrait as opposed to street photography. But it's okay to do it because if you're trying to tell a story, it should encompass everything. So street photography is great for developing your camera skills as well as your creative eye. You have to react quickly if you want to capture the moment. It means you need to be able to operate your camera without thinking. Capturing the essence of a place and the people who live there is a combination of portrait, landscape, still life photography, and incorporates some skills needed in sports photography as well. Traveling to foreign countries is an exciting challenge for the street photographer. In addition to needing to work quickly and sometimes discreetly, you'll experience new cultures and places to test your creative abilities. You don't have to spend the money and the time for foreign travel, though, because there's plenty of opportunities to develop your street photography skills right in your local towns and cities. So I'm going to talk about some tips that I think will help you produce great street photography. So the first tip is to travel light. So for some photographers, the ideal equipment for street photography is a digital SLR or a mirrorless camera with a telephoto zoom. This is especially true if you're interested in street portraits or you're just too shy to get very close to strangers. But if you are prepared to get close to your subjects, a camera with a wide angle, or maybe even a standard lens. When I say standard, I mean effectively a 50mm lens, that range. That's going to be all you need. Carrying camera bags and cases loaded with lenses and accessories just makes you stand out in the crowd as a photographer. Having lots of equipment can slow you down, and it's going to mean you're going to miss a lot of shots. For many years, 25 or so, I shot with a Pentax Spotmatic camera. It's a 35mm film camera, and I used a 35mm lens, which is essentially a medium wide angle lens. I even shot with a twin lens reflex camera on the street. Then I moved to a combination of Canon and Nikon film cameras, and then eventually about 2001 started to shoot primarily with Nikon SLRs. Then about 3 years ago I switched to micro four thirds cameras, and I currently use an Olympus. I've been using the Olympus OMD EM5. Now there are several other options that Olympus has released over the past couple of years. But depending on my needs or just my feeling, I'll go out with maybe just the 9mm body cap lens, or a 14mm, or even a 17mm lens. Recently I've been using a 12-40 f8 Pro lens from Olympus. I really love the lens. It's very versatile, but it's just a little big for my style of street shooting. If I could only own one lens for street shooting, I'd probably take something in the 12 to 17mm range on a micro four thirds body. Tip number 2, do some research. If you aren't familiar with the place you're going to shoot in, it's worth to carry out some research. What times of day are the streets the busiest? In the city, there's often more people around early in the morning. Um, and as the workday begins, is there a market day? Is there a festival that would be a great background for your street photography? Also helps to know the direction of light at different times of day, and what side of the street's going to be in shadow, what's going to be in bright sunlight, and how's the weather likely to be on the days that you plan to visit. Certainly in large cities like Los Angeles, New York, London, Tokyo, there are lots of people on the streets all during the day and early evening, and sometimes a place like Times Square through the night. In large entertainment areas, subjects are available, as the theaters let out. So get a feel for the land, for the geography, for events that are taking place, and the venues that are going to have lots of people. Capture the people in natural situations. The essence of documentary and street photography is recording people, particularly street photography, going about their daily lives. I'm not going to break down the definitions between documentary and street photography at this point. But a commuter hailing a taxi, or a market seller stacking goods for display. These are examples of people in a natural element. The telephoto zoom is ideal, but using a wide angle helps to isolate the people from the distracting backgrounds. If you prefer to get closer to your subjects, or you don't have a telephoto, practice shooting from the hip so that you don't draw too much attention to yourself. Camera with a tilting screen is really ideal for that. Don't be afraid to shoot in auto mode. Street photography is about telling stories and about capturing moments. If you're thinking about camera settings and the technical aspects of photography, you're going to be distracted. Modern cameras produce really well exposed shots in most situations, so don't be afraid to switch to an auto mode. Use a camera that you're familiar with. Don't have to refer to an instruction manual or waste time experimenting with settings when you're on the street. To be clear, you should know and understand all your camera settings. It's important to know when to use each feature. Sometimes people think that shooting in manual all the time is the mark of the pro. To me, it's just the mark of someone who wasted a lot of money paying for features that they never use. Understand the camera modes, know when to use them. Personally, I'm generally interested in depth of field when I'm out on the street, so I often shoot in aperture priority mode, and I'll have the f-stop somewhere around f8 to f11. Unless I'm in a subway. In that case, I'm going to be wide open and maybe have to tweak the ISO. Another thing I'll do on the street is I put the ISO on automatic. Most cameras allow you to set the range, so you can set it not to go below, whatever, 100, 200, and not to go to above, again, depending on the camera, 3200, 6400. It depends on your tolerance for the, I'll say grain, but the digital noise, and in your vision, again, for the images. Another thing that I do is I wear the camera around my neck, and I keep the thumb or a finger of my right hand resting on the shutter release button. That way I can take a picture without making any movements, and I can often take a picture of someone who I'm talking to without them being aware that I did it. Then I love to show them the image. In the written article that goes with this video, you'll see an image is kind of a soft focus, but you see somebody just putting his finger right in my face. He wasn't mad at me, even though we were standing nearly kneecap to kneecap. He was just asking about the body cap lens, so it makes it look, because of the distortion, that he's really in my face. Which brings me to my next point. Don't be afraid to talk to people. Shooting from a distance, you can capture natural expressions and behavior, but there are times when it's better to talk to people and ask if you can take the picture. Approach potential subjects with a smile. Respect their wishes if they don't want to be photographed, but you'll be surprised at how often people are willing to pose for you, particularly in tourist areas. Take several shots as you talk to the subject. you get a kind of a hybrid between a posed and a natural image. If you're using a pretty wide angle lens, you have the camera around your neck, you've got your thumb on the shutter release button, and you're talking to them. Their guard drops a little. They're not so concerned about posing as you engage them in a conversation. And generally, they love to see the results when you turn the camera around and say, "Oh, here you are." I wrote an article last year about a trip to Los Angeles, and there were several photos that illustrate what I'm talking to, and the idea of candid versus pose and asking permission. It's the story of Robert, and in the written article that goes with this video, there's a link to that article, and it's just pretty far down the article, so scroll down to the part about Robert and read that if you want samples and a further explanation of what I'm talking about. Street photography, it goes back to the earliest days of cameras when people began to take an interest in documenting life in pictures. It's a great way to develop your skills, either for a career in photojournalism or some other genre of photography, but it's also a good way just to have fun. It's a good way to get out of the house, get some exercise, and the cool thing is you can start with some very basic equipment and develop your own style and approach. Speaking of basic equipment, if you aren't already doing this and you want to get into street photography, you can buy a used or reconditioned Olympus OMD. The EM5, which is out of production now but still readily available, is on eBay for, I don't know what it is, $400 or $500, and you can buy the 9mm body cap lens for less than $100, and you're in business. All right, thank you very much.